Big L, rest in peace. Rest in peace.
The biggest thing in the world. He scared me to death. Yo, when I heard that on tape, I was scared to death. Yeah. I said, yo, there's no way I could compete. If this is what I got to compete with, I said, there's no way.
On February 15th, 1999, legendary rapper Big L was shot 9 times in the face and chest. He passed at the age of 24 and died at the crime scene. Today we will analyze this tragic incident and break down all the events that led to the shooting. For that, we need to go back in time and take a look at the place he lived in and his relationship with the people in his neighborhood. Big L grew up in Harlem, New York, on 139th Street and Lenox, with his 2 brothers Leroy, aka Big Lee, and Donald, aka Big Don, who were technically Big L's cousins. But Dawn and Lee's mom took L in and raised him as her own. L always saw them as his brothers and looked up to them. They were serious street cats and gangsters, especially Big Lee, who, along with his friends Matthew White, aka Reggie, and Thomas Riley, aka TC, founded the notorious West Harlem crew 139th Street NFL, which was basically a clique of territorial crack dealers and killers, which Big L would later join. Lee, Reg, and TC would not only sell drugs together, but they even went in and out of prison together in the 80s and 90s. So they were real tight. They stuck up and extorted people and controlled the area which Big L would later call the danger zone.
139 Atlantic is the danger zone, where no man can withstand the holding zone.
The key reason why L lost his life is because of a chain of events that revolve around reckless and stupid decisions by his older brother Big Lee, who managed to upset the entire NFL crew, for which Big L had to pay the ultimate price. It all started when NFL co-founder Reg got introduced to the crack game, thanks to an old man named Marv, with whom he started hustling together. Marv taught him everything about dealing drugs, and Reg taught it to the NFL crew. He was his mentor and the reason why the NFL crew got into selling crack. But then he got murdered by either Lee's cousin Country or someone close to him. Country left Harlem and Reg had to fill Marv's shoes in the drug game. He couldn't do it alone, so he got TC, Lee, and a guy named Shake with him. They would run drug operations on 139th Street together and split the profits. But Lee was caught hiding a portion of the profits from the drug sales, putting it into his own pocket so that TC and Reg would receive less than what they deserved. And this type of behavior would later get Lee and also Big L in trouble. Lee's entitlement, narcissism, and willingness to screw over his own brothers. In that particular incident, he blamed it all on his partner Shake, saying that he got high on his own supply, and that that's the reason why the money is missing. But the truth later came out and everybody understood that Lee was screwing them over. TC and Reg were furious and hurt. How could their brother steal from them and then blame it all on his partner Shake, who they considered a brother as well? All this was done because Lee wanted more for himself. According to NFL member Lou Black, he was cold and selfish. This was in the late 80s before Big L even started rapping. Reg wanted to kill Lee even back then. But how do you kill your brother over money? They loved Lee way too much for that. So they let it slide. But this type of response only enabled him. And Lee would try to see how far he can go. He interpreted their love for him as weakness, assuming that they're only letting it slide because they're scared of him. So this would only get worse and worse over the years. From that point on, they would work in 2 groups to make sure that Lee can't screw them over again. TC and Reg worked 1 week, Lee and Shake would have the next. But that didn't work out because of mismanagement of funds. Between the 4 of them, they didn't have money to buy more work. And on top of all that, they got into multiple shootouts with a Jamaican drug crew, which started selling in NFL's territory. The Jamaicans vacated the premises, but Lee and Shake got charged with attempted murder and weapons possession. Shake was released on his own recognizance, and Lee was granted bail. TC and Reg around that time started doing stick-ups, and slowly started losing interest in selling crack, which didn't mean that they stopped entirely, but from time to time Lee would take over for them. And he was very talented, turning a small crack operation into a tremendously successful enterprise. But his weakness was greed and impatience. He wanted more and more. His pay cut wasn't enough for him. He also didn't want anyone else to have the same success he had achieved. If someone even attempted to reach his level, it was perceived as a threat, and he responded accordingly. He couldn't help himself, and even had this aggressive and reckless attitude in the presence of his best friends. It was as if no one was supposed to have nice things but him. TC's cousin Lou Black described him as a money-hungry man with a superiority complex. Someone who always needed to be the center of attention. The alpha male who always had to be in charge. Lee thought he should run the block, and what he said went. According to Lou Black, Lee's mistake was trying to lead with intimidation. It supposedly worked for most except Reg, who also had a strong personality. People gravitated to Reg out of love and respect, not out of fear. He made everyone around him feel comfortable and accepted. And that might have bothered Lee to a degree, and might have made him jealous, because he could lead and receive love from everybody without having to resort to intimidation tactics. So there was a little bit of competition going on. But the two were still close and had each other's backs. Over the years, Lee's lust for supremacy festered into a full-blown envious mentality. And according to Lou Black, who again is the cousin of Big L's murderer G Love and TC, this is what put a strain on their relationship. They would go through periods of distancing themselves, but Lee supposedly needed to align himself with a man of Reg's caliber because his demeanor and attitude kept people away. Reg was the one that brought people together, and Lee supposedly had a problem with that. He wanted everyone to embrace him. That's why he came up with a plot to take over everything. After a while, Lee was in control of the whole block, but only because TC and Reg let him, out of love and respect. TC decided to explore new territory and started hustling in the park, but Reg stayed out of it. He tried his best to be a hustler in the crack game, but to no avail. He would always do something wrong or he mismanaged his business. So he decided that selling drugs wasn't for him. He chose the way of the gun and became a quote-unquote quiet assassin. Started sticking people up to provide for his daughter. TC made a lot of money in the park, and Lee once again got jealous. All of a sudden he wanted to sell in the park as well. Control not only the block but part of the park at the same time. Cause he wasn't selling much. So TC let him. Lee came out with the green tops while TC had the red ones. Reg was just sitting back chilling. This was around the time when he got close to G, the guy that would later shoot and kill Big L. G, just like Reg, wasn't the hustler. He basically followed Reg's lead and embarked on a trail of violence that would include armed robberies and other treacherous acts. It was a horrible way for G and Reg to make a living, but it's the road they chose to travel. According to Lou Black, things started to go south after Reg, TC and Lee went to jail. Cause Lee supposedly changed after being separated from his friends for that long. Reg and TC got out a year before him. Lou Black also believes that the reason why Lee was so quick to cut off his friends or see his friends as enemies is because of his childhood. Lee's mother supposedly told him that he has no friends and that he can't trust anybody, as Lee's father was murdered by his so-called friends. This was the type of malice and contempt she instilled in her son's heart. Seclusion from Reg, TC and everyone else made Lee reevaluate his relationships. He started calling people homeboy, just like his mother advised him to. Cause she said, the people you hang out with and love are homeboys, not friends and definitely not worthy of a brother. After his release, Lee would go back to selling drugs in the park, while TC and Reg did their own thing. But this meant that Lee was now in full control of not only the block but also the park. And that made his ego grow significantly. A year later in 1991, Big Lee's little brother, Big L, started to make a name for himself as a rapper. He met Lord Finesse, who asked for Big L's number after hearing him freestyle. He was then introduced to the crew DITC, Diggin' in the Crates, which consisted of Lord Finesse, DJ Mike Smooth, Showbiz, AG, OC, Diamond D, Buckwild, and Fat Joe. They were all impressed with Big L's lyrical skills, and he was asked to join the crew. He couldn't wait for his time to shine and practiced vigorously, perfected his skills, and then entered an amateur lyricist competition in 1992, defeating almost 2,000 rappers with ease. Everyone knew that he had a bright future ahead of him. After Columbia put out the single The Devil's Son in 1993, L continued working on his debut album Lifestylez of the Poor and Dangerous, which would later become a classic. One of the greatest hip-hop albums ever. He actually featured most of the big names of the NFL crew on the back cover. Gerard Woodley, aka G-Love, who again was not only Big L's childhood friend, but also the guy that would later shoot and kill him. Then we have G's getaway driver during the murder, the one that gave him a place to stay and hide, Rashid Alim, who went to school with Big L. Then we have Reg, again one of the founding members of the NFL crew, the one that introduced everyone to the crack game. TC, another founding member and brother of G, the guy that killed Big L. And then we have Lou Black, the cousin of G and TC. Big L was cool with all of them, or else they wouldn't have been on the cover.
I gotta say peace to the 139th Street NFL crew, my crew, word up. Big Lee and Don Ice, Reggie Reg, TC, Tom, Lou, Black Tone, G-Love.
The single Put It On had his name hot in the streets. L wasn't really involved in that life, unlike his big brother Lee, but he came from that same neighborhood and was part of the clique. The album came out on March 28, 1995, but it didn't perform well on the charts, and L's relationship with Columbia Records became strained. They felt like L's music was too raw and gritty for the radio. There was no one at the label who was willing to push his music. So he had to figure out a way to advance in his career without sacrificing too much of himself to the music industry. Cause he wanted to stay true to himself and to not become something that he's not, or something that he can't identify with or relate to. He didn't want the music industry to change him and force him to make music that he doesn't like. Around the same time, his brother Lee started making more enemies for himself. He had a friend called Black Tone, whom he would treat to the movies, buy food, and make sure that he's alright whenever they were together back in the 80s and early 90s. Lee was kind-hearted back then, but got colder and colder over the years when things weren't going so well financially. Black Tone, on the other hand, started making some serious money. The tables had turned, and it was now Lee who would ask Tone for money. Cause Tone would sell drugs near a place called Gus's Bar, which made Lee a little jealous. He wanted in and sell his drugs there as well. Just like when TC started having success in the park, he always wanted to take everyone's spot and business opportunities. TC had allowed him to sell his drugs there as well, but then later had to step away from it because Lee wanted everything for himself. And now he wants to do the same thing with the bar, which had become a cocaine goldmine. Unlike TC, Tone denied him access and Lee was pissed. It bothered him that he couldn't bully his way in as always. People were getting tired of him. Later, after the owner of the bar died, Black Tone bought it and could dictate who and what could be sold in his spot. But then one day Lee came in, acting like he owns the place, saying, "Yeah, my guy, ish looking real good in here. Let me see. Pebbles is gonna be on this side. Bo is gonna be on this side. You're on this side. What side am I on?" Black Tone then interrupted him and said in a loud, boisterous voice, "You on the outside, mother effer, cause your ass ain't coming up in here." Reg and TC burst out in a gut-wrenching laugh. Reg almost fell off the bar stool and TC spit out his drink. Lee was furious and embarrassed. Reg and TC laughing didn't help. He stood there for a second, turned and walked out. He took it as disrespect and didn't appreciate TC and Reg laughing. TC knew that it was on. Every time Lee saw someone making money, he wanted to have it for himself, even though he already had a steady flow of income coming from the park, which TC let him have after he asked for it. First they let him control the block, then they let him control the park, and now he wants to control the bar. He even said no one else could hustle in the park, even though it was TC who let him hustle there. So he was like a parasite trying to take over everything, while everyone else saw him as one of their problematic brothers whose bad behavior they have to tolerate to keep the family together. But it didn't stop there. Lee's mom would organize parties and social gatherings for everyone to come. Big L and Big Lee's brother, Big Don, started dancing with Black Tone's baby mother. And it came to a back and forth once Big Lee got involved. The next day when he approached him, accusing him of disrespecting his mother's party. To which Black Tone responded, "My guy, all I did was grab my baby mother and take her out the joint. How the F did I disrespect your mom's party?" "Because you did, mother effer. I said you did." Tone didn't want to argue and just walked away. But later that day, Lee and Don approached him at his bar, wanting Tone to fight Don one-on-one. They came around the corner and Don out of nowhere punched Tone, without saying a word, hitting him in the side of his face. Tone then fought back and managed to come out on top, with Don on the ground covering his face, and Tone swinging at him repeatedly. Lee didn't know what to do and watched his big brother get beaten up. A crowd gathered around them and Reg stepped in to break up the fight, pulling Tone off of Don. Reg looked at Lee like, "What the F is wrong with you?" Lee must have read his mind cause he said, "You know what the F this guy did? He disrespected my mom's joint last night." Everybody knew that Tone didn't do it. There wasn't much of a disturbance when he escorted his baby mother out the party. They suspected that Lee was still mad about him getting denied entry into the bar and using his brother as a pawn to get back at him. Cause as you will notice in this video, Lee would somehow always find a way to involve his brothers in his plans to get back at people. While everyone was arguing, Dawn sneaked into the bar and stole Black Tone's coke stash. After the crowd dispersed, Lee and Tone started arguing again. Lee yelled, "You ready to fight?" from across the street. Black Tone yelled back, "I'm not fighting you, Lee. I'ma let you catch your breath and get yourself together. Cause you fighting today, mother effer." Tone tried to de-escalate, but Lee wanted revenge for beating up his brother. Black Tone had sent his girlfriend to go get his gun without anyone noticing. Everyone tried to de-escalate, but Lee kept persisting. He was so busy in his rant that he didn't notice Tone standing in the street ready to go for his gun and shoot. TC tapped Reg and said, "Yo, he got his thing on him." Reg then asked, "How you know?" "That guy stayed across the street this whole time. That mother effer is in the middle of the street now. He want Lee to keep it up. He gon' pop him. Watch." Reg shook his head because he knew where this was going. Tried to reason with Tone, telling him to stop. Tone then said, "I'm good. You better tell that mother effer to chill the F out." Lee had no clue that Tone had a gun, so he kept ranting. TC then warned him, "That mother effer is gonna fire at you," which made Lee run towards Tone in anger, yelling, "That F-slur mother effer ain't gonna do ish. You went and got your joint? You better use it, mother effer." Reg and TC tried to break up the fight. They kept shoving each other until Tone managed to push TC away, and Reg fell to the ground. Tone now had a clear path to Lee, who then tried to back up, saying, "Aight, Tone, you got it. You got it, mother effer." To which Tone responded, "No, mother effer, you got it." Pulling the trigger and striking Lee in the leg, who then fell to the ground. Tone fired again, hitting him in the same leg. Lee was on the ground, yelling at Tone, "Aight, Tone, you shot me. You shot me. You got it. You got it." Black Tone stood over Lee, pointing the gun at his head, pulling the trigger saying, "I'ma kill you, mother effer." But the gun was jammed. Lee was on the ground with his arms blocking his face, trying to squirm away from the line of fire. Tone pulled the trigger again, but it was still jammed. Everyone shouted at him, telling him to stop, which made Tone black out and point his gun at everybody. He then calmed down and walked away. TC then carried Lee into a cab, sitting at a red light. They wanted to drive towards Harlem Hospital, but then Tone and his girlfriend, who were in a second car, drove next to the cab Lee was in, wanting to finish him off. He wanted to shoot inside the cab, but then saw his brother Bill inside with Lee, which made him tell his girlfriend to pull off and get out of there. After that incident, Tone rarely came around the block, but Reg, TC and G still kept in touch with him, even though he had shot Lee multiple times, which of course infuriated him. It would explain why Lee's relationship with them was slowly falling apart. But yeah, TC helped him to get to the hospital, even though a week prior he had a fight with Lee and Big L. L was in the gambling spot on Lenox, owned by a man named Bo. He happened to be on the losing end that night, and was sore about it, threatening to punch TC's godbrother Fella, who he lost to, starting a fight for no reason other than him losing all his money in a game. After seeing his godbrother get threatened by L, TC motivated Fella to fight back, giving him the look as if to say, "If you let this guy put his hands on you, I'ma put my hands on you." And TC had a reputation for his fighting skills, so everybody respected him. Big L then started swinging at Fella, who then fought back and ended up winning the fight. L then supposedly ran out of the spot to tell his big brother Lee, who then went to the gambling spot to threaten people. But TC and Fella weren't even there anymore, so he threatened people who had nothing to do with it, and then stole Bo's coke stash for no reason. A lot of people, including Lou Black, were mad at him for that. He just robbed an innocent man for no reason, someone they all considered a friend. People suspected that he stole it out of jealousy, because Bo had more money than him. Every time someone was doing better than him, he got upset and tried to take their spot or their money by force, even though they all considered each other brothers. The next day, Lee approached Reg, asking for TC, whom he wanted to beat up for making Fella fight Big L. "Where your man at? I'ma punch him in his mouth when I see him." "Who?" Reg asked. "You know who. TC told Fella that he better FL up in the gambling spot last night." Reg thought that Lee is stupid. "What the F did you expect him to say? That's his godbrother, Lee. The hell you mad about that for? They fought one-on-one. What's the problem? If you was there, you would have told L the same ish, right? I don't give a F. I'ma punch that guy in his mouth." "Well, you go right ahead. Hit that guy if you want to. You know him, and you know that ain't gonna turn out good." As luck would have it, TC came right around the corner and greeted them. "What's up, Reg? What's up, a-hole?" before walking into the building. Lee decided against approaching him, and a week later the shooting with Black Tone happened. The reason why Lee wanted Dawn to fight Tone was because Reg had told him a week prior that it was perfectly fine for TC to tell Fella to fight Big L in order to settle their differences. Reg even told Lee that he would have done the same if he was in his place, and Lee wanted his payback. So he used TC and Reg's words and way of solving problems to settle his differences with Tone, thinking Reg and TC can't have any objections to a fair one-on-one fight, since that's what they let his little brother Big L and Fella do. But the plan backfired. Both of his brothers, L and Don, got beaten up by NFL members, and Lee felt disrespected and emasculated, which pushed him to get back his masculinity by taking even more drastic measures. According to Lou Black, Lee was blinded by narcissism, a cloud that overshadowed his sensibility. People really loved Lee and would have walked through fire for him. The loyalty people had for him was undeniable, but we were only his quote-unquote homeboys, Lou said. With Lee becoming the main guy of the NFL crew to do all the drug deals, and TC and Reg doing all the stick-ups and shootings, a lot of outsiders, including the feds, assumed that Lee was the head of the NFL crew, and that the stick-ups and shootings Reg was involved in were part of the dirty work of Lee's empire, which was far from the truth. NFL had no leader. It wasn't even a gang, but Lee wanted it to be one. People started saying that NFL stands for N-words for Leroy, even though the L in NFL stands for life. Lee loved the attention he got. He had aspirations of him being in control of everyone around him. He wore a sense of entitlement, lusted to be recognized as the leader, wanted to be revered by the people in the streets. And it worked. In 1996, Columbia dropped Big L from the label, and he was now on his own. He went independent. And then in 97, Big L's brother Big Lee was arrested and charged with carrying a firearm, but he later made bail and was released. This was the year when Lee's relationship with Reg started to go downhill. Lou Black believes that it might have been because of Lee's jealousy, as Reg was getting more notoriety in the streets because of him shooting a man at a drive-thru who killed his cousin. So his reputation was building momentum, and compared to Lee, he was a pleasure to be around. Lee's ego was supposedly larger than his reputation, and Reg was the opposite. He was respected by people like Rich Porter and Black Just from the Supreme Team, who wanted to do business with him at different points in his life. NFL was going to be flooded with work, and Black Just was going to help Reg and TC make the transition from the streets to music, so that they can put their guns down and make money legally. Lee didn't have those connections and wasn't the type to easily get along with people and build relationships. He was the complete opposite. So he supposedly envied Reg and started talking bad about him behind his back, saying that he's no longer NFL but part of the Supreme Team, cause they would always hang out together at parties. The Supreme Team was from Queens and NFL from Harlem, so Lee started calling Reg Queens Reg. Reggie just ignored him and wasn't trying to feed into Lee's ignorance. He was trying to build bridges for the whole NFL team, while Lee was busy burning them down. Reg could link up with someone of Black Just caliber, and Lee couldn't. His welcoming personality had always been a gateway for opportunity. Lee, on the other hand, had an off-putting demeanor. He was unapproachable, so people generally kept their distance from him. He hated the fact that Reg got more attention, more admiration, made more alliances, and therefore had the opportunity to make more money. One time he robbed a friend of the Notorious B.I.G. and stole his chain. Lee supposedly stopped talking to him until Reg had to sell the chain. And then all of a sudden Lee started talking with him again. But then when Reg got the chain back, Lee stopped talking to him entirely. Reg even brought it to TC's attention, and all he could do was shake his head. He also stopped talking to TC's cousin Lou Black when he started making money. So people from the NFL crew started to dislike him for his character flaws and weird behaviors, seeing his brothers as competition that he has to keep down at all costs and preventing them from growing, while preying on their downfall or stagnation. The next time Reg and Lee spoke was around the time Lee was fighting the gun case. One day he returned from court and approached them, saying, "Guess what the DA told me? He said he'll cut me a deal if I give you 2 up. Reg got annoyed and instantly replied, "The hell you mean he'll cut you a deal? You snitchin' mother effer?" Lee then responded, "F you. Ain't nobody tellin'. Get out of here." "So what the F you say that dumb ish for?" TC asked. "F both of y'all," Lee said before walking off. This made TC and Reg look at him in a different light. It had their minds racing. They wanted to know what his problem was and kept an eye on him from that point on. The turning point came when one of Big Lee's cousins, not country but a different one, was murdered in 97, shortly after Reg's 30th birthday, which was in August 97. The cousin was shot and killed on the way into his building, and it was reported that the killer rode up to the victim on a motorcycle. At the time, Reg had been riding one in the days leading up to the murder, and he was also a known shooter. So the rumors started spreading through the hood, and of course Lee heard them. He was saddened by his cousin's death, He never actually had a chance to build a solid relationship with him. Instead of approaching Reg about it and asking him if he was involved, he stopped messing with him entirely, putting a heavy burden on an already strained relationship. Reg looked at it as Lee just being Lee and kept it moving. In Lee's mind, however, a pot of revenge was brewing like coffee on a Monday morning. Somehow, some way, he was going to make Reg pay. Just because of rumors and suspicions alone. He never had actual evidence or a solid reason for Reg to go and shoot his cousin, who was loved by everyone. In his mind, Reg had to pay with his life. After his cousin's burial, Lee put his plan into motion, beginning to devise an unsavory scheme to execute one of his closest friends. On September 21st, 1997, Lee's brother Big L approached Reg and asked him for the chain that he stole from Biggie's homies. He wanted to go to the Tunnel nightclub and wear it there to look flashy and rich. This was odd because 1, L had already tons of jewelry himself. Why would he randomly ask for the chain? And 2, Reg and Lee were not seeing eye to eye at the time. Now all of a sudden his little brother comes out of nowhere to ask him for a chain, which caused Lee to cut contact with him. A lot of people think that Lee used L to make Reg lower his guard, testing the waters, while making him think that everything is fine between him and Lee's family. Reg just gave him the chain to signal that everything is cool, that he still sees them as his brothers. All while Lee supposedly put out a hit on him. The next night, L came to ask for the chain again. What the hell did L need the chain for on a Monday night? The day prior, he wanted it for the club, but now he didn't really have a reason to ask for it. So that's why people believe that Big L was part of Lee's plan to take Reg down. Cause just minutes after Reg gave L the chain, an unmasked gunman approached Reg as he was leaning back on a parked car and fired 4 or 5 rounds into Reg's chest. He fell to the ground and the assailant disappeared. Lee and a couple of his homies were standing a few buildings up the block when the shots rang out. They immediately jumped in the MPV and backed down the block where Reg laid, clinging to his last bit of life. They lifted Reg's body into the van and drove to Harlem Hospital, which was 3 blocks away. Upon arrival, they carried Reg into the emergency room, where the staff began the process of trying to save him. It was to no avail. Despite their efforts, he could not be revived. Reg lost his life on September 22nd, 40 days after his 30th birthday. It marked the beginning of NFL's downfall. Reg was the glue that held the group together. So who could have possibly wanted to cause him harm? One of the 2 people that everyone suspected was G Love, who was Reg's student and best friend. The other one was Lee, who wasn't on good terms with him anymore. And some people even said that the shooter was seen with Lee prior to the shooting, adding that this was a common tactic of him, aligning himself with outside shooters or so-called thugs, and bringing them around the block to intimidate his own people. They also said that Lee took an unnecessarily long route to the hospital when they tried to save him, accusing him of intentionally driving there slowly so that Reg bleeds out and doesn't make it to the hospital in time, saying that people made it to the hospital faster on foot than Lee with his car. They even added that he held at a red light, even though he was never the type to care about traffic rules, since he's been a criminal all his life. People joked about him being afraid of a traffic ticket. But yeah, Lee was the primary suspect. G had nothing to do with it. He was devastated when he heard that his mentor passed, broke down 3 times and had to be picked up from the ground. Reg's death created a fire in him that burned like an inferno. He wanted revenge. Both G and Reg were known shooters, and everybody knew that someone was going to pay. That someone would be Big L, who was there at the crime scene minutes before Reg got shot. The night of Reg's wake, TC and a couple of his people were chilling in the park when Lee's right-hand man, a dangerous guy who's been in prison for 10 years, approached TC and asked him where G was. TC then asked him, "Why? What's up?" "That mother effer is going around telling people my brother murdered Reg." TC shook his head, stood up and replied, First of all, my brother's dealing with emotions right now, and there's no telling what he might be saying. Second, I don't give a F what he said. Ain't nobody doing a mother effing thing to him. TC and his people were ready to fight him, but Lee's right-hand man just walked away. Lee was nearby overhearing the conversation. When TC walked past him to leave the park, Lee approached him and wanted to speak to him. I know we haven't been the best of friends lately, but we are the last two real mother effers left. When I find out who did this ish to Reg, we gon' handle it. Me and you. TC looked at him and extended his hand for Lee to shake it. He looked him dead in the face and said, "No doubt, homeboy. Just let me know." Then he walked off. In the back of his mind, he knew that Lee was guilty, but he had no proof for it. He used Lee's own subliminal against him. The whole homeboy thing I talked about earlier. Lee understood what TC was trying to say and knew that he had to keep an eye on him. At the funeral, Reg wore a multicolored Versace shirt and some black slacks. They also put the chain that Big L borrowed around his neck. Lee and his people supposedly wore Versace shirts, slacks and gaiters, just like Reg. Everybody thought that they came to the funeral as if they're dressed for a party. The only ones that were dressed that way were Lee's people. The rest of the NFL crew was dressed in black and had no clue about Lee's plans. According to TC's cousin Lou Black, it seemed like Lee was trying to create a division, showing everyone at the funeral who his people were and whose side they chose. Lee only notified who he wanted dressed that way, a decision made collectively amongst themselves. Lou also suspected that Lee subliminally taunted Reg by designing a flower arrangement in the shape of a motorcycle. Again, Lee's cousin was shot and killed by a guy on a motorcycle, and Lee believed that it was Reg who did it. Now he's giving him flowers in the shape of a motorcycle. Members of the NFL crew suspected that it was indeed Lee who ordered the hit on him. The next couple of weeks, TC tried to put the pieces together to find evidence of Lee's involvement, but he was unsuccessful and didn't get far. G Love still hadn't recovered from that loss, and Lee was paying Reg's mother a visit, promising her to find the person responsible for it, even though the whole neighborhood suspected that he was involved in it. So the guy that murdered her son was consoling her. When TC saw that, he walked out the house and shed a tear, thinking that Lee had become Bishop in the movie Juice, played by Tupac, a character that, without remorse, killed his childhood friends for no reason other than display of power. In December 97, Lee was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the firearm case. This meant that Big L was completely on his own now. He was working on his next album, The Big Picture, and was about to take the next big step in his career. In February 99, Dame Dash offered Big L a record deal on Rockefeller Records. Jay-Z's label would have given him the push and support he needed. He would have been able to sell millions. While everything was going in Big L's favor, something sinister was taking place on the flip side. His brother Lee was still calling shots from the pen. He hadn't forgotten how Black Tone shot him, leaving him with a permanent limp. Black Tone was coming back to the hood more often now that Lee is gone, and he was spotted with TC and G. They were still friends, which of course upset Lee, and he wanted revenge. He also wanted TC and G out of the way, while he was still locked up. With Reg dead and Lee in prison, TC was the new leader of the NFL, and G Love was Reg's right-hand man, trying to fill his shoes. But Lee wanted to be on top again when he comes out of prison. So that's why he plotted to have Black Tone, TC and G killed. All three were on his hit list now. He wanted to get rid of whoever would pose the most viable threat when he touched down. Lee supposedly thought that TC and G suspected him of having something to do with Reg's murder, and he knew that they would retaliate if they ever found enough evidence. So he wanted to get rid of all the potential enemies he would have once he comes out of prison, so that he can build his empire without anyone interfering. Getting into another shooting with them after coming out of prison would once again land him in jail. So that's why he needed to get it done while he's in prison. wanting full control over the NFL crew and its territory once he comes back. Cause with Reg being out of the picture, only TC as one of the founding members of the group and his brother G remained. So maybe it was about power. Or again, to guarantee peace and to make sure that there are no repercussions for what he supposedly did to Reg. Out of the two, G was more of a hothead, so he had to go first. In prison, Lee linked up with the shooter from Brooklyn and gave him the list of people he wanted him to take out. This was the ideal time, because the hits couldn't be traced back to him as long as the shooter kept his mouth shut. The only problem was that the shooter didn't know what the targets looked like, and they had to be pointed out to him. Their older brother Don was incarcerated at the time, so the only one left that Lee could trust was Big L. He had already helped him when Lee put out the hit on Reg, the whole thing with the chain to test the waters. His only job this time was to identify the targets, nothing more. When the shooter was released from prison, he made his way to Harlem so he could link up with L. L kept the shooter close until his part of the job was done. They walked through the neighborhood together so that L could point out the targets one by one. And the two got seen by people from the neighborhood. They asked L who that guy was cause they had never seen him. And L couldn't really explain it. Didn't really know what to say or give a reason to why he's in the neighborhood. To some people he said that it was Lee's man he met in prison. And to others he supposedly bragged about his big brother Lee sending shooters from BK to take out G. G Love supposedly suspected that this was another one of Lee's plans. Cause why would Lee send a random guy from Brooklyn to L? He wasn't a rapper nor a producer. Just some guy Lee met in prison. And for whatever reason he had to meet up with L. One day G stepped out the crib to get some fresh air and noticed the BK shooter watching him from across the avenue. He walked around and checked if the guy is still following him, which he did. He then went inside the building of a friend called Blinds and pretended to come back with a gun. Soon as he came out the building, he started running directly towards the guy from Brooklyn, reaching for his jacket, pretending to reach for his gun, and the dude just ran away. In his mind, G thought, "You effed up, Lee. You sent a lamb to do a wolf's job." Lee's plan had backfired. The guy from Brooklyn never came back. But the entire neighborhood knew that Big L was the only guy he talked to. He got seen by multiple people and became a target. The only way to get back at Lee was by going at Big L, cause Lee was in prison, and so was Don. Lee put the life of his brother, a rap legend and future superstar, on the line for a silly divide and conquer mission to get full control of the neighborhood, even though he already controlled it with his childhood friends and brothers. He was just too selfish to share it with anyone else. And now his little brother had to pay the price for his foolishness.
Stay off the corners, that might be your best plan. Before you catch a bullet that was meant for the next man. Before you catch a bullet that was meant for the next man.
G Love immediately notified TC and Black Tone and vowed to kill that guy if he ever saw him again. TC told him to just stay off the block. G then took his brother's advice and got low. But staying off the radar won't make your problems go away. He knew that it was only a matter of time until Lee sent somebody else. And he knew that Big L would once again point him out to the shooter. He was Lee's most valuable chess piece in the war. So G made the first move and used the only way to hurt Lee. And it all happened a week after the failed attempt on G's life. On February 15th, 1999, Big L was hanging out with two of his homies in front of 560 Lenox Avenue. They decided to escape the cold by spending time in the supermarket on Lenox, standing by the payphone pretending to make calls, just to kill time and stay somewhere warm. One of Big L's homies said he needed to get a cell phone from the crib, so they left the store and walked to his homie's building. After arriving, L's friend called his brother and asked him to bring the phone downstairs. As they waited in front of Building 45 in Delano Houses, a dark figure appeared from the opening in the gate on 139th Street. As the man got closer, they could see that he was dressed in black, with a stocking cap over his face. Approaching the three men, He pulled his gun out and motioned for the two homies to get out of there. His only target was L, so he only focused on him. The two homies took off running toward 139th Street. Escaping through the same gate the assailant came in. Big L ran back toward the building and let out a scream. About the same time, the first two shots rang out. The screaming stopped a couple seconds later, but then another 7 shots broke the silence of that night. He was shot in the face and chest and was dead at the scene. The gunman disappeared into the dark as the two friends returned to see their friend laid out in a bloody mess. One of the police officers on patrol that night said that the only thing that's holding his head together was his do-rag. There was no saving him. He was shot and killed in his own neighborhood by his childhood friend. Word spread fast. Fellow DITC crew members Fat Joe, Lord Finesse and Showbiz rushed to the scene and were all in disbelief, asking themselves why anyone would even think of shooting Big L. The world had lost one of the best rappers to ever live. First Pac, then Big, and now L. Lee broke down when he heard the news in prison. His plan had backfired and Big L became a casualty in his game of war. That was a hell of a price to pay. Now he had to sit with that on his conscience for the rest of his life. Big L's service was held on Saturday, February 20th, 1999. They brought Lee down from prison to attend his little brother's service. It was an open casket so everyone could see Big L for one last time. People were surprised how good he looked, considering the damage he had sustained. Lee laid over his brother's body and silently mourned. His heart burned with anger and revenge when it should have been filled with regret. Deep regret for involving Big L in something he wasn't built for. Something foolish and completely unnecessary. Died because of his brother's twisted, narcissistic mind. Lee let his street mentality supersede his intellect. He should have served his time while Big L blew up in the rap business, potentially returning to a legitimate life free from drugs, guns, murder and prisons. Big L and Jay-Z would have been a deadly combo, but unfortunately we'll never know how far L's career would have taken him. His potential was infinite. With the love L had for hip-hop, there was no limit. With his name being tossed around as a suspect for the Big L murder, G went into hiding. He would resurface every now and then to show his face and see what was going on around the way. On one of these occasions, he got caught by a federal agent 3 months after Big L's murder. As luck would have it, G landed in the same jail facility as Big L's brother Don. G immediately reached out to all the Bloods to get backup and support. He had to be prepared. Don tried to get his people to kill G in jail, but no one wanted to do it, so they had to handle it man to man, and G had a weapon with him. They both were on edge. That night and every night after, neither of them could sleep well the whole time they were in the same unit. But nothing happened in the end. The two men just learned to coexist. Although Don hated G, it was in his best interest to put the beef to bed. The two avoided each other at all costs. The homicide case was taken off the table due to lack of evidence, and the murder case remains a cold case to this day. G's guidelines fell between 3 and 5 years for all the other cases they had on him. Lee got out before him in March 2002, after serving 4.5 years of a 5-year stretch. He came out with blood on his heart and a thirst for the sweet taste of revenge. Twin and Stash were chilling on 139th Street and Lenox talking about Lee and the probability of him coming home to get revenge, when a van pulled up on the corner of 140th and Lenox. Twin said to Stash, "I bet that's Lee right there." 4 guys jumped out of the van and sure enough outstepped Lee. They spoke to some hustlers telling them that they can't be working on 140th Street anymore, since Lee is taking back his block. Those hustlers were working for TC, who then notified him and told him that Lee wants to talk to him. But the two never met again. After talking to the hustlers, Lee then jumped back in the van. A couple minutes later, the van came back around 139th Street. Lee and his people got out, approached Twin, and asked, "What up?" Twin returned the greeting. Lee then looked at Stash and said the same. Stash then replied, "I don't F with you." Twin then told him to chill, to which Stash responded, "Chill for what? I don't F with this guy." Twin pulled Stash to the side and told him to break out. After a stare-off, Stash and his man walked off in the direction of his grandmother's crib. Surprisingly, Lee was calm during the exchange. He just watched Stash walk away and then asked Twin for TC and a guy named Whitey, to which Twin replied, "I don't know. I'm out here. I can't speak for anybody's whereabouts." Every time Lee went around the block, the people he was looking for weren't around, and that boosted his confidence. He felt like everyone was shook. He made reference to him turning the block into a ghost town. This played into Lee's hands. With little to no resistance, he was free to resume his activities as he pleased. He even paid Red's baby mother a visit and played with her kids. Twin was shocked to see him play with the kids after being responsible for his death. During a conversation where Twin asked Lee about the rumors, he heard him more or less admit to killing Reg. "People kicking dirt on my name and talking ish about me. But it was okay when Reg did what he had to do for his cousin," referencing the incident where Reg and G shot and killed a guy at a drive-thru after he shot and killed Reg's cousin. So in other words, when Reg does it, it's fine. But when I do it, it's wrong. Cause he basically did the same thing. Reg supposedly killed Lee's cousin, and Lee put out a hit on Reg. So they both got their payback. Now Twin had undeniable proof that Lee was behind Reg's murder. Lee then asked him about Rashid, who's Stash's uncle. Stash was the guy who days earlier told Lee that he doesn't like him. He was disrespectful towards him. Reason why Rashid was on Lee's hit list is because of two rumors. First, he was supposedly the getaway driver for the murder of Lee's brother Big L. And second, he offered G Love a place to stay and hide after the murder. He supposedly hid in Rashid's crib. In any case, he was an accomplice. Twin didn't give him an answer, and Lee tried to pressure him to pick a side, either with him or against him. To which Twin responded that he's not taking anyone's side. A day or so later, Lee saw Rashid pull up to visit his mother. He noticed Lee and his goons standing at the park, and the two gave each other the screw face before Rashid jumped in the car with Stash and two others. Lee and his goons jumped in the van and followed them, which made Stash decide to take him out, even though Rashid told him to leave it be. One night, Stash was leaving his grandmother's crib, and Lee happened to be standing across the street with his baby mother. His entourage wasn't with him that night. Lee called out to Stash, "Hey yo, let me holler at you for a minute." Stash and his homie walked up and had a short chat with him. Lee then said, "I heard your uncle had something to do with my brother getting killed." To which Stash responded, "My uncle ain't have ish to do with it. Well, I'm about to start cleaning house around this mother effer. And when people start dropping, you and your uncle gonna be the first to go," Lee said. "What? You heard what the effer said?" "Yeah, okay." Stash then turned around to walk away, but he reached into his waist to grab the gun. He spun back, and when Lee saw the gun, he gave Stash a look like, "You ain't gonna do ish." Stash then began firing shots into Lee's chest. He was so close that Lee grabbed him by his jacket with a death grip, while a look of shock overcame his face as shell after shell penetrated his torso. Lee was strong. Stash couldn't break free, so he pulled the trigger again and again until Lee unclenched his hand. His limp body collapsed to the ground after letting go. Lee died just 2 weeks after his release from prison, 3 years after the death of his little brother Big L. So now 2 of the 3 founding members of the NFL crew were dead. Lee had caused a divide within the camp and it never recovered. Stash was later sentenced to 33 years in prison. Shortly after the death of Lee, G Love, the murderer of Big L, was released from prison in 2003. He would close ties with the rap label Murder Inc. and work with them. In 2011, he then got locked up because of a gun charge. G was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released early in September 2015. A couple months later, on June 23rd, 2016, G was then killed by a man dressed in black. He was shot in the back of his head and then twice in his back, when he was laying on the ground dead. Lou, TC and Rashid were devastated when they heard the news. And then the rapper Cameron showed up to G's funeral, which upset a lot of people since he paid his respects to the guy who killed his friend Big L. On June 23rd, 2019, which was the 3-year anniversary of G Love's murder, Lee's son was murdered, possibly in retaliation for the killing of G Love. And that's the story behind the tragic death of Big L, a lyrical genius whose life was cut short far too soon. Rest in peace to one of the greatest to ever touch the mic. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.